it is of vital importance that we in the private sector have an expanded view of our responsibilities. We cannot define our responsibilities narrowly, just in terms of profit and loss. We have responsibilities to a wider society. And those responsibilities do not end after we make our CSR donation to the latest activity that catches our fancy. It is of vital importance that the building of diverse societies we understand to be part and parcel of our program. In creating companies that have diverse workforces, we become an important force in creating diverse countries that are enriched by their diversity and not crippled by their diversity. From my experience owning and sharing the most ethnically diverse banking institution in Nigeria, all it did for me was to reconfirm my view that there is talent across all cleavages within the society, that we do not lose anything in being diverse, but that by being diverse, we create the foundation for a rich and a stable society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor. That was quite an enlightening keynote, and it's a pleasure to have you. So we're going to ask that questions be put in the chat box, as has been said. Questions here as well to ask. So, can I be heard?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I don't know if there are any questions that have been put in the chat box while the professor was talking. Okay, so Moraleke says, thank you for session. From Francis, he says, thank you so much, Professor Bello Osage, for the lecture. Leaders often appoint into key positions based on trust, which often takes time to build. In a multicultural and multi-religious society like Nigeria, with historic ethnic clashes and wounds, how can one foster mutual trust among tribes with deep mistrust for one another? And can one truly hope for a method of selection in such environments, which is based purely on merit? So that's a question from Francis to the Professor Akim. I don't know if there are any other questions, but Professor, would you like to take that?
All right. I often, that's a very interesting question, because again, it was the classic question that was often asked by a lot of people in the United States, especially white segregationists. That is, you're asking us to hire people that we don't know, we don't understand, that are different from us, and we cannot trust. And therefore, we shouldn't do that, and we can't be compelled to do that. What I found in my own experience is the following. When you look back at all the people that you hire, especially in medium and large-scale organizations, the bulk of the people are people that, in all honesty, you didn't really know before. Yes, when you're an entrepreneur, your partner that you set up with is usually a person that you have known for a long time. That is normal, okay? Because the issue of trust is very, very important in that kind of situation. But in actual fact, the bulk of the people, you go by their credentials, all right? And therefore you sort of say to yourself, okay, I'm looking for an accountant. So what kind of accountant am I looking for? He's got to have a CPA, or he's got to have his ICANN. You have a set of attributes that person has to have. And on the basis of that, you try to compile a list of people, or you ask a headhunter to help you and go forward with that list. Now, it's not the case that there's an issue of trust, and that's why you don't take them. It is more the fact that you are more willing often, because of the way you are brought up, to take somebody who comes from you take somebody who comes from a group that you are familiar with. And because you're familiar with that group, you feel safe with that group. And therefore, you do not want to cross that divide of the other person. And I think that what you need to do in that situation is to basically simply take that leap and cross that divide. I'll give an example of something that happened to me. I once decided that I wanted to post to Abuja the head of a branch in Lagos. He was a man who had come, guy who grew up from Lagos. When I announced and informed him that he was being posted to Abuja, he hung around my office for about 3 days, waiting to see me. And I finally agreed to see him. And he asked me, what had he done to offend me? Why was he being posted to Abuja? That please, I mean, that he's tried to imagine, did he insult me? Was there something he had said? Maybe had been reported to me, and so on and so forth. And I said, no, that you are an outstanding branch manager. And I believe that Abuja, given its centrality and it's the capital of Nigeria, it needs an outstanding branch manager. And that's why I'm sending him there. And I'm taking somebody from the Abuja branch who is from the northern part of Nigeria, who's been in Abuja all his life, and I want him to come to Lagos, all right, and work in a branch in Lagos because he's used to government clients all the time, but I've noticed how able he is, and I want him to come to Lagos and get accustomed to the hustle and bustle of Lagos. So I want you to understand that as you are complaining to me, what have you done to offend me? So the man in Abuja is doing the same. I said, please go. But I promised him that I wouldn't leave him there for more than 2 years. And he grudgingly went. What's interesting is that after 2 years in Abuja, when I now called him to post him back, he now asked me again, what have I done to offend you? In that 2-year period, he had acquired some land in Abuja. He had discovered there was a golf club in Abuja, and he was having a great time. And he started making comments to me along the lines of, you know, Mr. Chairman, you know, these Northerners, they're not bad at all. In fact, I have many very good friends among them, blah, 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 blah. And I was fascinated to see how a lot of his preconceptions had changed. And he really did an outstanding job of training a lot of people in the Abuja branch and making it one of our very best branches. One other thing I also tried to do as well was basically to hire 2,000 youth corpers every year, distributed among all universities around Nigeria. So I said, if somebody has a first class or an upper second class honors degree, please apply to do youth corps with us. Again, the effort was to try to make sure that there were youth corps from all over the country and to make sure that they mixed. So I'm saying that while you think there's a problem of trust, it's something that you can overcome. Now, the one thing I do want to say, which is probably at the back of your mind, which I think you said indirectly, is that I believe that diversity and merits can go hand in hand. Federal character has quite correctly developed a very bad name because it has become an excuse by people. You want to appoint a person that is a friend of yours, so he's my man, I'm his godfather, so I submit his name and I say, this is the Edo State representative. Or I say, this is the man from the South. In actual fact, I'm practicing, I want to be a godfather. Now, my own view is the following. Well, while I was outside United Bank of Africa, I did not collect names from anybody. All I would do is I would constantly be looking for able people from all over the country. So in talking about diversity, we still get the best and very good people. And just as there was a time at which people thought there were not very good women to find to do certain kinds of jobs, I believe that if you have an open attitude, you will find that there are very good and able people from all ethnic groups in our country who, if given the chance, can perform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. And I did note that you mentioned, you dealt with the issue that I was going to talk about, which was the place of merit in enhancing diversity. And I also noted as well that you actually touched on the issue of diversity with regards to gender. So Uzo James has a question for Professor Bello Osagie. It says, do you see the nation dropping the ethnic barriers in the nearest future?
Well, first of all,
and what do you also make of ethnically biased statements?
Okay. Well,
Okay.
the two things.
What do you make of ethnically biased statements?
Well, okay, I'll address both of them.
Okay.
One of the unfortunate things is social media. All right. In saying that it's one of the unfortunate things, I don't believe it should be regulated, and I do not believe that laws should be made specifically for it. It's a wonderful tool. Like all tools, it can be abused. But one of the things I do notice about people on the social media, I think there's something about sending something out into the whole world in which your face doesn't show, you don't see who you are writing to, and it just seems to allow people to remove all their inhibitions and all their restraints and say the most amazing things about other human beings. I'm on a WhatsApp platform in which somebody wrote to another person, "You are the only dimwit in an otherwise highly intelligent family." Now, I don't think that the person would have ever said that face to face, but somehow on the internet, he felt the willingness just to let that fly. And so we do have statements on the social media that are appalling. I don't think I need to repeat them, but I'm sure you've heard of them. This country, but for you stupid, lazy characters, we country would have made progress, but for the fact that you are dominating. Oh, this particular ethnic group, you are basically unreliable human beings. Nobody should trust you. Oh, this group of people, you only live with your containers, and that's what dominates your life. And you said flying. I think that needs to be curtailed by education. And so when I'm on a WhatsApp group and people are making such comments, I take a stand and I make a statement about it. I think it needs to be curtailed by family upbringing, but I don't think that censorship, okay, is the answer to it, because all that happens is that it goes underground. The issue in terms of whether or not I think that the ethnic barriers in Nigeria can be overcome, I do believe they can be overcome. Part of that is because I am by nature an optimist, and because I also believe very, very strongly that we often overestimate the strength of the problem, the strength of a problem that we face. I'd just like to give an example of some of the problems that people have faced and have overcome in life and compare them to where we are today. When I was a first-year student in university, we had a political professor who said to all of us, there's nothing in life that is impossible. But he said that there are few things in life that you can say will never happen. Just a few. But other than that, open your minds. I want to share with you what that professor said to us were the impossible things in life that we won't see in our lifetime. And this was 1973, when I was first year politics and philosophy science student. The first prediction he made in 1973 was that while Oxford University had started to accept women in the various halls and colleges, that in our lifetime, we will never see a female Prime Minister of England. And I have to tell you that we all agreed. Less than 6 years later, something that we all thought impossible, it happened. Then the second prediction he made was that the domination by Russia of the Communist Party, a party that dominates and has under its control army and state security, that domination will not be removed in our lifetime. That was 73. By 1989, we had seen that the Communist Party had lost its position within Russia. Then the man said, looking at me, Kim, while it is true that many of you are marching and protesting about white domination in South Africa, you will not in your lifetime see or be able to walk the streets of Cape Town and Johannesburg. On the 40th anniversary, on the 30th birthday of my wife, I took my wife to walk down the streets of Cape Town and sent a message reminding my professor of that prediction, which at the time I believed. The last prediction he made was that within our lifetime, we will not see a Black president of the United States. It was with great delight that we witnessed the election of Barack Obama as president of the United States. Now, why do I go into all this detail? I go into all this detail because if in 2020 things look bleak and you ask the question, can we ever overcome our ethnic barriers? The scale of the problem that you are facing cannot look or appear any more difficult than it must have been in 1973 for Nelson Mandela in his 10th year in prison to imagine that in 20 years after that, he'd walk out of that prison and become the president of South Africa in a racially changed society. So I retain my optimism that yes, today, things don't look great. Things look as if they're ethnic barriers that we're never going to overcome. But I believe that they can and will be overcome, but it will happen gradually and in stages. And as people school together, they do youth corps together, they work together, we'll be creating the foundations of something that we will see in 10 or 15 years' time. And other generations will look back and wonder why we all felt why we felt that there was no hope and that we must give up, We should not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Those were quite insightful words, and they were encouraging words as well that give us hope that we can actually have some sort of ethnic bias removed from our society in the near future. So we also have a few comments from people who have really excited about your presentation. And Peter says, the details are of a great importance. 1989 also meant liberation of people in Eastern Europe. Today, I freely teach in Poland and many times give Mandela as a leadership example. Thank you very much, Professor. Do we have any further questions for the professor? And if we don't, we will move on to our panelists, our panel session.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed.
All the best.
Okay then.
So Our panel session, we have a panel session and we have 3 panelists who are going to do justice to the topic of leadership and diversity. And I will go through their profile very shortly and introduce them. Our first panelist is Engineer Charles Osezwa, who is OON-KSG, a businessman and a social engineer. A former gas engineer who has championed several of the early efforts in the development of natural gas in Nigeria, Osezwa has about 40 years experience in the oil and gas industry. He has advised at the highest levels of government and industry on technical and policy issues. Currently, he serves on several boards, including Pan-Atlantic University Foundation, the Institute for Work and Family Integration, Ovelingso Group, Kodros Capital Limited, and it's a pleasure and a real honor to have him on our panel today. Our second panelist is Hilda Kabozenga Krieger, who's the MD of Rome Africa Jobs. Hilda is an executive with almost a decade worth of experience in consulting and human capital development across EMEA. She's the current MD of Rome Africa Jobs, leading the Jobs brand in 6 countries, including Joberman Nigeria. Joberman Nigeria is Nigeria's biggest jobs platform, with over 2 million job seekers and 60,000 employers. She is passionate about human capital, organizational behavior, and about solving Africa's talent and productivity challenge. And our third panelist is in the person of Fabia Ogumekon. She's the Executive Secretary, Whisker, Nigeria. Fabia Ogumekon is a lawyer and corporate executive with 20 years experience working in the fields of law and development across corporate organizations and non-profits in the healthcare, gender, and entrepreneurship sectors. She is currently the Executive Secretary of Women in Successful Careers, Whisker, an NGO that advocates for gender parity. So Whisker is an NGO that advocates for gender parity and empowerment of women through structured mentoring and role modeling for leadership programs. She is also the faculty of the she's also the facilitator of the nonprofit leadership and management program at Lagos Business School. It is with utmost pleasure that I welcome our panelists, and each panelist has 5 minutes each to discuss their thoughts on the topic for today, which is the role of leadership in leveraging diversity to build a virile nation. So I will start with Engineer Charles Osezwa, who is the Chairman, Institute of Work and Family Integration. Welcome, Professor. Welcome, Engineer Charles. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Anita. And I should thank also the organizers for inviting me. It is a delight for me to be here. And more specifically, when you say I should make some comments or express my views on the theme of the conference, unity in diversity, and more specifically, role of leadership in advancing unity in the workplace. Now, let me, as a nation, I would say unity and diversity is an aspiration, but it's the same aspiration that, if you like, you and I, in our various business places, we drive. In the sense, we seek harmony in pursuit of a team spirit. Whatever our objectives are or programs we are driving, be it in sports, in our businesses, or even in government, nation building. So it's an aspiration. And so over the years, we spent enormous time nurturing that team spirit to ensure a successful outcome. Because of course, you need that cohesiveness, you need trust. I think trust has been talked a lot about during the lead Professor Kim Bello-Osage's presentation. And it came up again and again in the question and answer. People need to be open to know. And of course, so you can collaborate among each other or with each other, bringing out the best in our individual members. So we can create, if you like, achieve what I'll call collective, what represents our collective humanity. That is the aspiration. Now, let's talk more specifically. In my experience working across sectors, be it in the public sector, the private sector as a businessman, and more later in my life, running nonprofit organizations, what I find consistent is that leveraging unity in diversity demands of leaders a host of virtues, which include, without boring with the list, I'm sure we all, a host of virtues. That would be self-discipline, if you like, self-mastery, diligence at work, integrity, meaning what we say, and of course, empathy, being able to appreciate or putting ourselves in the other party's position so we can understand. So very often, therefore, I tend to tell people, I say, leadership is education in virtue. So I find myself continually learning to understand people, to understand the team dynamics, and adapting to acquire, if you like, new habits, so I can continuously motivate the team. And in doing so, of course, what do we get? Individuals are motivated to give their best. And of course, we got a greater collaboration and greater trust. People work more harmoniously. And we talk about innovation and increased productivity. Consequently, what do we see? We see enhanced productivity. And this is not just in business, it's in the public sector. And it happens also more especially, I would say, where I am today, with non-profit organizations, where people are really driven, but they have a passion for what they are doing. So innovation, but it helps us all to grow our professional prestige. And for me, that is the dignity, the human dignity, which we talk about. Because at the end of it all our measuring yards or yardsticks is about that professional prestige by self-fulfillment or the individual's fulfillment. And so we talk about the dignity of the person. So at this your work and family integration, working with corporate leaders and managers, we tend to emphasize the fact that there's no decision I make, or indeed any manager makes, that is neutral. There's an impact on somebody. And those ones have consequences. Therefore, the way I communicate, my management style, the way I relate to people, can alienate or motivate people to achieve, to self-actualize and contribute to the bottom line, which we as entrepreneurs and investors talk a lot about. But it's about helping the individual to motivating the individual to self-actualize, to give their best within a team or a group, which in turn helps the overall performance of the organization. Now, if we look at it, therefore, how have we as a nation have we done well? I think Professor Osagie told us very clearly how we've done. We have not done as well as is possible if we were to harness the diversity, the benefit of our diverse nation in the business place. And of course, if we do that, to do that, it presupposes, therefore, we are reaching out to people and we are building trust across the divide. In my personal experience, we have had to actually go beyond those divides. Not just about the work, but even going to the family level. Let me explain quickly what was why the Institute for Work and Family Integration. We found it necessary at some point to offer programs on marriage relationship. From a philosophical point of view, we find that it is to enable the person achieve success, not just at work, but also at home. So they become indeed a successful person. And this is the whole philosophy for us, because it's about the person and how the best in them is brought out. Now, at the national level, we have legislations and policies that promote unity and diversity in the workplace. We are compelled to have diversity in our boardroom and in management. In the keynote speaker's presentation, it was an initiative, but now is by law. Question: are we realizing the benefits inherent in diversity? The answer, of course, is no, we are not. And I dare say that it can change, but I think the answer to that is on our leaders. Do we see ourselves, do we have virtuous leaders? Do we build the trust across? Do we minimize or eliminate marginalization and alienation within the team? And of course, when one feels isolated or alienated, they do not contribute to team success. And this is our national challenge. And that's why I must say I congratulate the organizers for bringing this to the fore, so we can think more about it and see how we overcome those challenges and barriers and build across the various barriers, if you like, the divides between the various in our diverse society. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Engineer Osezua. Now, thank you. Before the other panelists get to share their thoughts, I would like to ask you your 1 or 2 questions right on the heels of what you have just said now.
Okay.
In your dealings with business leaders, will you say there's a drive towards inclusivity, gender, ethnic, ability in the workplace?
Oh, yes. I mean, there is. I just talked about, I mean, in the lead speaker's presentation, we talk about quota system in Nigeria. There are all sorts of laws and corporate policies on diversity. One of my companies today, we're trying to implement the requirement of the corporate governance, the code of corporate governance. You have to go out consciously. So you engage headhunters, human resource service companies to help you recruit. But so there's a conscious and deliberate effort to diversify, to be more inclusive. But it all starts from the top. At the board level, yes, we are diversifying our boards. I mean, this is across, I'll say, the whole industry. You'll find that also in management. And once you've done that, yes, the echoes, or you've set the tone for the rest of the organization. And indeed, you then hope to actualize or to reap the benefits of diversity. I think a lot of it has been enumerated by the professor on the, but that is really, and it's that there is a conscious and deliberate effort through government policy, but we're also motivated by the benefit inherent, in diversity itself. If we can create, if we can achieve unity in diversity, then we know very clearly our views are broader and we're able to achieve a lot more. Growth and expansion becomes much easier. And we will talk about innovation and the rest of it. There are a whole lot of benefits. But that is where our nation is here to get to. Because of the first point I made,
yes,
leadership being education in virtue. We need virtuous leaders to harness those benefits. So we can leverage merit from across the vast ethnic composition of our nation.
Thank you very much, engineer. And I can see that you have actually taken the lead on the second question that I would have had for you, which was about how does increased diversity in the workplace propel social economic development in Nigeria. But you've already answered that already and told us how much value this would actually bring to our society. Now, do we have any questions from the chat box for Engineer Sezua? And if there are no questions for now, but please, he's still with us. And so all the questions should please roll in, comments, questions. I'm going to have our second panelist who I have already spoken about, who is, I'm sure she's ready and waiting, in the person of Hilda Krager, who is the MD of Rome Africa Jobs, to do a quick 5 minutes presentation on her discussion, on her thoughts. And then I have a few questions to ask her, as well as questions from people that are joining us. Thank you very much, Hilda. It's a pleasure to have you at this panel session.
Thank you so much, Eniton, and thank you so much for the organizers for inviting me. I think for me, looking at the theme, which is unity in diversity, I take the recruitment perspective to it, just thinking about Jobberman and the Brighter Monday brands and all the data we collect around the recruitment industry and around talent management and how that plays out given the diverse continent that Africa is and even Nigeria is as a country. And it was so interesting listening to Professor Bello Osage, because a lot of the points he mentioned actually come out really well in the data that we have, and we see it happening every day. And just thinking through, just as a beginning, the kind of diversity we find companies struggling with a lot. I'd say one, there's something around educational background. So we find that one, there could be that certain foreign qualifications are preferred over local qualifications generally. Second of all, it seems to be even a tier system for local universities. So we find a lot of companies blacklisting universities from a particular part of the country or from a particular religious affiliation. And the thing is that there's no correlation between, where you go to school necessarily. It could be, but as somebody with talent, you should all be given a chance to at least apply, go through the process and see if you get through. The second thing we see often is generational diversity. So a lot of companies right now are struggling to bridge the gap between Generation X and millennials in the workplace. There's a deep cultural divide, or like expectations that we see, and they're often ignored by leadership, kind of like this will resolve itself until a conflict explodes. Millennials have a very different aspect, and I think Generation Z that's now coming up as well have a very different work style and different expectations of the workplace, very separate from Generation X and the way things were, let's say, in the 90s or in the 80s or before. And I think when the different generations work together in a diverse environment, there's a lot to learn from each other. There's a lot of rich experience that comes from Generation X and baby boomers. At the same time, there's a lot of technology advancements and innovation that comes from millennials. And of course, it should be encouraged. However, it has to be managed properly. The third thing, of course, is gender. And I would say what we've seen, I think concretely from our data, is that on average, in Nigeria especially, women are less likely to get offers than men, just even from the get-go. We've seen that even though the offer rate overall in our database about 2%, when you control for women, it goes down to about 1.5%, which means naturally, if you're not being deliberate about hiring women, it's very easy to just go on without ever bridging that diversity gap. The other thing would be religion, I think, which is very clear in Nigeria. And the other interesting fact that we've seen is also tribe. So we've seen that generally people are more likely to be hired if the hiring manager is from the same tribe as them. This doesn't have anything to do with their talents, right? There's a connectivity or connection there, but it typically ends up in having a monolithic demographic in the workplace. And the way I think about it, saying you don't see gender or you don't see age is burying your head in the sand. I think we typically say, oh, all I look at is meritocracy. But if you do believe that talent is evenly distributed, which I believe and I think which is the truth, then you should be deliberate about trying to make sure this is reflected in your organization, right? And to achieve unity and diversity, therefore, requires leaders in organizations to have a holistic approach towards diversity, right from the time you recruit, the way you manage your staff, and the way you even help them transition out when they have to. And what do I mean by this? So when you're hiring, you need to, one, adjust for bias, but also be deliberate about bringing the demographics you don't have. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, we do not have enough people from the North. For these 2 new roles we're hiring, can we try and get in Northern candidates? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? You can still find talented people from the North, from the East, from a particular age group. If you don't have a goal to do it, you're less likely to achieve it than if you've got a goal to do it. The second thing is around retention. Fine, you brought these people in, they're very diverse, life is good. How do you build a comfortable environment for everyone, right? I think for me, I'd say you have to develop an employee value proposition that's reflective of your entire demographic. Oftentimes we find you bring everybody in, but you're only truly serving one demographic. You'll have mothers, you know, you'll have young people, you'll have different religious affiliations. And the question becomes, what are you doing to make your workplace attractive or at least comfortable for everyone, right? Are you making people uncomfortable? There's so many practices that have been normalized in the workplace in Nigeria and I guess across other African countries that simply discourage diversity. For example, evening meetings, you know, how are the moms in the organization or the females in the organization supposed to stay around for a meeting at 9 p.m. If it's institutionalized, of course, you're discouraging that level of diversity. They will leave and it'll be hard to get more. Compulsory morning prayers, and this is actually more common than you'd think it is. If everybody must show up and pray, you know, especially like in a Christian way and a Muslim way, and it's compulsory, what does that mean for the people who are religious minorities in the organization or who want to come in but are scared that they'll be forced to practice a religion that's not their religion, right? Things like that, and the way you build your culture, the way you think about your employee value proposition, you need to keep in mind the fact that if you want to have diversity, you have to make your workplace comfortable for everybody all the diverse people you want to bring in. The third thing for me, I think hiring, retention, so promotion, right? Again, here you have to be deliberate about upskilling and promoting diverse teammates. I think you can be merit-based while promoting diversity, unless you think, of course, that only one demographic is talented, which is not true. So you have to be deliberate about creating opportunities for women, for men, for older people, for younger people, for the different religions, for different tribes, and making sure that everybody has a fair shot in the organization at advancing, as opposed to making it easy for some people or just ignoring the minorities that you may have. And the last thing for me, I know it's supposed to be 5 minutes, but I like to keep things neat and tidy. So last thing for me would be around exits. Yeah, exits happen. They're not always, you don't always plan for them, but you need to ensure consistency, especially now, like for example, with the coronavirus pandemic, where lots of people are being retrenched, right? We need to get rid of the assumption that there's the particular demographics that are more, that are better prime candidates for retrenchment. And a lot of what we see is moms, right? The first thought comes to, oh, she has children, maybe she'll be better at home, let's put her on the list. And that really doesn't mean anything. You are making career decisions for people who might have goals that are different from yours. So coming up with objective metrics around hiring, retention, promotion, and exiting is one way to ensure that you're deliberate about building diversity and also creating a culture that actually encourages people to be diverse while within your organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hilda. That was succinct and straight to the point. I enjoyed listening to that, and I'm sure that all our participants and listeners enjoyed that as well. So I have 1 or 2 questions for you while I wait for questions from the comments. And okay, good. Okay. So the first question I would like to ask you, so I want you to talk to this point, is how exactly does diversity benefit businesses in Nigeria? Can we talk about it in, at the end of the day, how does the push for diversity, saying, let's have all the diverse groups, like you mentioned, the different generations, the males, the females, the religious, the religious, how exactly will businesses say this is a benefit? Because we're trying to push something that is not exactly the very norm. And as we're seeing from what Professor Bello Osagie said, the practice of diversity that he said, at the end of the day, sort of paid the workers. But now in terms of businesses and the employees as well, how exactly would you say it benefits them?
So I'd say a number of things, right? This one is a big one around innovation. I think lots of research has proven that diverse teams are generally more innovative. Of course, given your background, your upbringing, the things that have shaped you, you'll have different perspectives towards life, right? So when it's time for problem solving, for coming up with new solutions, you'll most likely get to a better answer by having different diverse perspectives than sticking to the one aspect you know. If you think about Nigeria, for example, let's say you as a company want to create a new product that you want to go all across Nigeria. You are better off having a team that's representative of the entire country coming together to come up with that product than assuming that a single monolithic demographic is going to sit in one room and be able to build something that the entire country is going to relate to. That's one thing. The second thing, which for me, I think typically relates a lot to age, so that the generational divide and also the gender divide to an extent, is just around experience and the way people think, right? That when you think about the difference between the way Generation X and millennials especially, Generation X brings a lot to the table in terms of experience, in terms of what they've seen. They've definitely been in the workspace longer. Generation X, Z, or the millennials are bringing pretty much the global perspective, which they have because they're tech natives, right? Deciding to anchor on just one, a millennial will not know that this one idea they have generally will not work because it's either been tried before or because the older generation will not be open to it. They will not be able to see that. And at the same time, a Generation X person might be skeptical about some new technology, some new ideas, simply because they don't understand it. Being able to bring those teams together in a diverse way creates for a better problem-solving experience, which inevitably leads to better products or better solutions. And from a company perspective, you will grow you will grow better than if you've just got one monolith.
Oh, thank you, Hilda. And so, before we go on to call our next panelist in the person of Fabia, I would like to ask you one final question, which you may have answered, but you can summarize again. But how do you think we can ensure that the drive for diversity in Nigeria today in the workplace does not actually lead to mediocrity, as has been seen with the abuse of the federal character in terms of education and other aspects of our society? Yeah.
So for me, my personal belief is that diversity and meritocracies are not mutually exclusive, right? Talent is equally distributed. I think one of the things that we could do, and that we encourage at Jobberman, is to bring more objective data points to the conversation around hiring, right? We've seen, for example, this year we introduced competency-based assessments. So basically, if you're looking for a sales agent, let them do a sales agent's test or a sales manager test or a marketing test and see their qualifications. What we've seen is that where previously certain demographics, or especially women, would be left out from that level, when that objective data point is the first point of contact from recruitment, you're more likely to advance diverse groups because you look at their capabilities before you look at everything else, right? Even if you had a bias before, if you look at a test score that's telling you 70% versus telling you 60%, it says something. And I think the less we rely on subjectivity, we've seen from our data, for example, as I mentioned earlier, that you're more likely to be hired if the hiring manager is from your tribe. But just by introducing a testing component to it, it'll become almost impossible, because how do you justify it when there's people from other tribes with scores that are just as good or even better? So I think the less subjective we make recruitment and the more objective we get to personality tests, behavioral analysis, competency-based testing, all these data points which actually speak to the talent of a human being or of somebody trying to bring into the organization, as opposed to your own subjectivity based off a conversation, they will help us get better diversity without necessarily bringing about mediocrity. There are smart people everywhere in every single demographic, and you can find them.
Thank you so much, Hilda. And Abdul Hakim says, wow, that was amazing, Hilda. Adeshola says, thank you, Hilda, for the brilliant presentation. Kemi says, and we have Moralake saying, true, diversity brings innovative ways to approach or deal with issues or solve challenges. So we await your comments and your questions from everyone. Great insights, but this is from Peter. It says, great insights, input on leadership. Thank you, Hilda and Engineer Charles. While Moralake has a question, she says, how can we solve the problem of organizations blacklisting certain universities? So Hilda, I believe that question is to you.
Honestly,
engineer, you can also contribute. I mean, really.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know. I wish I had a clear answer, but one thing I can say is that things are slowly changing. So previously, and we're not yet at the blacklisting point, but previously you had a situation where certain universities or certain organizations wanted first-class degrees only, second-class degrees only certain fields. We're now seeing that large employers actually have no preference and they're willing to bring people in and train them, especially at entry level. The idea is that, eventually if that, as we see that, reap the results of that, of not controlling for a first class, or not controlling for an engineering degree, especially at entry level, we might get to a place where somebody's not controlling for Unilag versus an Ahmadu Bello or a different university. I honestly do not know how to get there. If I did, we would have tried to solve this already. A lot of it is rooted in maybe previous experiences over the years that employers have had, or maybe just their biases based on the majority of candidates that they've brought in historically. It's going to be a long path. And I think also a lot of work would have to be done also in terms of standardizing university quality across the country, such that employers are comfortable speaking, recruiting from every single university. Until we can solve both those sides, like on the supply side and the demand side of labor, it will be tough to get to a place where universally, no matter your degree, you are open to at least interview or at least apply to a role. I don't have an easy answer, unfortunately.
Thank you, Hilda. That was not a very easy question in the first place. I don't know if Engineer Cesar has a comment or two. I can see that he probably has something to say to helping us solve this difficult challenge.
No, I think Hilda has dealt with it really. The only solution is to go quantitative. I mean, there has to be a common measure, and then you can eliminate the biases. We all have inherent biases, and maybe based on experience. However, to bridge that is to have a common standard for recruitment.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Engineer. And Peter says, the problem is many rating agencies do not account for work and social competencies, only value research, which is important, but does not take into consideration many present challenges. We need more inclusive rating agencies. So over to all of you in this space, we need more inclusive rating agencies, says Peter. While Adeleke says, how do we solve, there's a question actually, how do we solve the problem of organizational leadership, jettisoning affirmative actions that are out of place, that are out in place to ensure diversity and inclusion? I'll take the question one more time so we can get it. He says, how do we solve the problem of organizational leadership, jettisoning affirmative actions that are out in place to ensure diversity, or that are put in place, is correct himself. I was going, okay, so he says, how do we solve the problem of organizational leadership, jettisoning affirmative actions that are put in place to ensure diversity and inclusion? Hilda, another question for you. You're muted. Yes.
I'm back. So my personal perspective on this is that at this point, in 2020, it's actually a knowledge gap. If you look at the global research around diversity, it's an inclusion. It's very, very clear that for an organization that's more diverse and more inclusive will go further. Maybe what we need to do is just, highlight those success stories more. I think the more the people can look at examples closely that they can relate to, saying, oh, the only difference between me and company X is that we're not as diverse, it will force them to move in the right direction. I think people, even though they might not necessarily react to what the words they hear, they react really well to data. They react really well to good life success stories, real life success stories. And the more we can highlight those and publish stories about and publish hard evidence and data around, even in Nigeria, around companies that approach their development and growth from a diversity perspective, we should be able to make progress. Personally, if you're in leadership right now and you are reading material that's relevant to the growth of your organization, it's almost impossible to go through 10, 15, 20 articles without reading something on diversity. So at this point, if you're still thinking that if you're still not clear about the benefits of diversity, it's a knowledge gap, not necessarily because it's not proven.
Thank you. Moralake says, thank you, Hilda. Standardizing the quality of education across universities is one of the ways forward, as you rightly said. And Adeshola says, thank you, Engineer Charles, for the great response. So thank you, Hilda. It's been a pleasure having you, and stay with us while as I go on to call Fabia Ogumekon to come forward and take us through her 5-minute presentation, and then we'll take questions after that. Fabia, you're welcome. Thank you for being a part of this with us.
Thank you so much, Anita.
You're welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm so concerned about my internet. I hope it stays the course. It's been quite shaky, but it's a pleasure to be part of this esteemed panel and part of just in the presence also of the esteemed keynote speaker. I have a couple of slides I'd like to share. I hope I'm enabled for slide sharing by way of giving my own sort of thoughts and reflections, specifically around, for me, the issue of I think honing it down, diversity has sort of been explained in different ways, and I work more now in a field that is more specific to gender diversity and ensuring that women get fair representation, both across all stratas of society, really, both in corporate organizations, specifically in terms of the work of WISC, but also across public life, public sector, and enterprise. So, I mean, what is diversity? And we've talked about that quite a lot, so I wouldn't dwell on it. But to me, and this definition is proposed by the Society for Human Resource Management, diversity is essentially a collective mixture of differences and similarities that include, for example, individual and organizational characteristics, values, beliefs, experiences, backgrounds, preferences, and behaviors. And again, the case for diversity in the workplace has already been made. And so what are some of those things, if I can just sort of recap on them again? More likelihood of higher innovation, a variety of different perspectives, increased creativity, faster problem solving. And this goes to some of the questions you had asked already, Eniton, of why, why the emphasis and what is it really for businesses? Why sort of focus on diversity? So again, the opportunity for better decision making, increased profits, higher employee engagement. So it's not just a nice to have. The fact that you have a diverse range of opinions, being put forward to then promote a specific product, for example, giving it a wider reach does ultimately tie into the bottom line, so such as increased profits, reduced employee turnover, better company reputation, and improved hiring results. And on the flip side, something that we haven't sort of spoken too much about, we've spoken a lot about diversity, but then there's also the other side of inclusion that sort of works hand in hand with diversity. And what is inclusion? Inclusion is essentially the achievement of a work environment in which all individuals are treated fairly, respectfully, and have access to opportunities and resources that can contribute fully to the organization's success. So, it's all good when we sort of focus around the issues of diversity, but it's a full sort of end-to-end package that also requires us ensuring that as we make the steps or the strategic steps to ensure that we're bringing in the right people, we have to also take that extra steps and make sure that not just do we bring them in, but we ensure that when they are in, they feel included, and so that we then sort of fully realize the benefits of diversity. Now, in terms of managing diversity and inclusion, addressing differences, why is that important? Because it addresses the differences that impact things like staff performance and organizational results. It invites us to sort of utilize the diverse potential and contributions from all employees. And it eliminates certain barriers, or at least reduces barriers that prevent and allow us to then recruit from the widest pool of candidates. And I believe Hilda referred to that. Ensuring that we have full representation from community members, depending on what sector, the ability of all staff to contribute and make their contributions and give them a voice, and as well as facilitate the progression of all staff. It helps to unleash productivity and creativity of ideas, innovation, which is great for innovation. We've spoken about that. And it also helps in increasing the competitive advantages for businesses. And in terms of inclusion, creates a conducive workplace that is respectful to relationships, that carries along internal and external stakeholders. Now, for me, I'm particularly passionate about gender diversity. And in Africa, 5%, according to McKinsey report, 2020 Women Matter McKinsey report, 5% of CEOs in Africa are women. And in terms of regional spread, 9% of CEOs in North Africa, 11% in West Africa, 16% in East Africa, and 20% of South Africa are CEOs of companies. And looking at the World Bank's Global Gender Gap Index, Nigeria currently ranks 128 out of 153 countries in terms of how well we're doing in end-to-end across the gender diversity ratios. And we're also 27 out of 53 countries issues in Africa. So not as great as we could be. And that particular report looks at the future of gender parity using indicators around education, health access, political and economic participation. So the case for gender diversity, I think, has already been made. It's not totally different from the case for diversity generally. So for the case for gender diversity is not far off from the case of having more, not just able people in the workplace, but also disabled people with disabilities or people living with disabilities, as well as people from diverse ethnic backgrounds. But just to touch a bit on gender diversity, the theme for the 2020 UN International Women's Day this year, before we all went into lockdown, remains each for equal. And that essentially challenges governments and organizations to strive for gender parity. And we're speaking specifically to a 50-50 representation across all spheres of life, of work life, which includes, like I said, both private and public spaces. Because what does that do? And I've sort of explained that before, or alluded to that. Again, a wider talent pool. And I think we can, sort of overemphasize these things. And I remember, I recall Hilda saying that if anyone doesn't sort of, after all of this, still doesn't buy into the whole concept of why this is so relevant for our times, well, hopefully we'll have a lot of converts at the end of this. So wider talent pool, enhanced collaboration, improved staff retention, up to 35% greater profitability for the companies that are profit driven, and more than anything else. And I think for me, just the fact that getting everyone's perspective and including as many people in terms of decision making leads to a better society. Now, from the leadership perspective, this is a quote that I like very much, and it says, "Trees die from the top." And I just like us to take a minute to reflect on that. Trees die from the top, which means essentially that the spirit of an organization is created from the top. And if the organization is in great spirits, it's because the spirit of its top people is great. And if it decays, it does so because the top rots. And this quote is by Peter Drucker. And essentially what that says is that in the whole space of driving diversity, leadership essentially has the greatest role. They've got to believe it, they've got to invest in it, they've got to strategize for it, and they've got to role model it. And I think that that's really where leadership comes in. Now, an organization like Whisker, we're a not-for-profit organization, and we're focused on empowering and developing professional women to contribute to growth in Nigeria. And essentially, our focus is to bridge the gender diversity gap. And this is why I introduced the work that we do. And we feel that it is important that women are included in all spheres of life and are enabled to play towards a better nation, whether it's in the private sector or in the public sector. I think it's no longer acceptable that 50% of a country's population, half of the sky essentially, is not empowered enough to be essentially able to contribute to their own quota. And that is the focus of organizations like ours, which is to build that capacity where we see the gap. So these are action and actual strategic steps that can be taken in getting more women into the workplace. But it's not just about getting more women into the workplace, it's about ensuring that they enter, that they stay, that they go through middle management, and they thrive and they get the top jobs, because it's really at the top. While it's important to have women at every level, it is at the top jobs that you really get the opportunity to then make policy and also lift others up, and therefore build up a critical mass in terms of gender diversity. And I just wanted to show some of sort of our success stories and what it is that you can do when you invest and put action behind the whole idea of working towards organizations and a more gender balanced nation, so to speak. And so the work at Whisker that we do is to build, to develop, to enhance, to mentor, and I'm sure hopefully I'll get the opportunity to talk about some of the strategic steps we can actually take in ensuring a more gender balanced workplace. So it's from building capacity and helping people scale, like Lola Esson, who started when she became a mentee of Whisker as heading human capital, and has today risen to be the director, a director of people and organizations at EY, and also sitting full circle on the board of Whisker. And her testimony, says essentially within 4 months of completing the Whisker program, she was able to then assume a senior leadership position in a publicly quoted organization, just showing essentially the rise and the possibilities when we invest and take strategic and deliberate steps to build capacity beyond the talk, to actually put some action. We build a critical mass of women, both in the corporate sector, but also in enterprise. And Amara is an example also of a testimony of what can happen when you build capacity for women. So I'll stop there in my initial reflections, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Flavia. That was quite another interesting discussion. And I have some questions for you. And I see quite a lot of comments and questions popping up on the chat box. And so I encourage you all to participate by sending your comments and your questions in the chat box, and I'll definitely make sure that I get to go through them. So far, so good. It's been interesting. It's been fun. I would like to thank every single person who is participating and who has joined in this particular conference. Thank you for joining us. We're really honored to have you. I would like to thank our panelists as well as our keynote speaker. So Fabia, your question is, women, do you think, even though you have answered that question actually already with your statistics that you gave in your presentation, but I will still bring it again just in case you have any other things that you would like to add to it from outside of your slide. Do you think women in Nigeria are sufficiently represented in the workplace? And I think you've answered that. So I'd like to ask you something totally out of the initial question. What do you think are the challenges to women not being adequately represented? You said there's 5% CEOs. Now, at the lower rung, what are the statistics of women in the workplace? Do you have statistics to that? Or if you don't have actual statistics, do you have any ideas or thoughts as to that? And then in your opinion, which is what I just asked now, what do you actually think are the major impediments to female inclusion in the workplace? And finally, because we're not just trying to flag problems, we're looking for solutions. What do you think are likely solutions to this issue? Thank you, Fabia.
Okay. Thank you, Anita. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Just checking. Okay, thank you. So let me try and just zip through quickly all of your questions in one. So are women in Nigeria sufficiently represented in the workplace? And the short answer is no. And the longer answer is that no, but there is so much more room for improvement, and there is cause for hope. And when we speak of the workplace, to set it in context, it can be the corporate workplace, it can be the public sector, private sector, and it could be enterprise. And it could even be microtrade, and statistics are not that easy to come by here, but we do have some statistics. In the corporate workplace, for example, entry level is usually 50-50 split at the entry level. So it's easier at recruitment stages, and I believe Hilda can support me on this. It's usually an open playing field, and it's usually more fairer across industries. However, as you move up, the numbers begin to taper down. And certainly as you get to C-suite on the board level, the numbers sort of just take a nosedive. In the public sector, in terms of representation, you see more women in civil service, but disproportionately fewer make it to the top jobs. And we're more likely to be political appointees than we are in terms of being elected into office. And I've got some statistics on the last elections, where 12% of the candidates running for senatorial seats, for example, only 12% of candidates who ran for senatorial seats were women. And only 7 eventually made it to the House of Senate. So we have 7 out of 106. We have 7 women in the House of Senate that make laws for this country out of a possible 106 seats. Not much better in terms of the House of Representatives. We had 560 women who ran out of 400,000 candidates. And currently only 11 out of 360 are in the federal House of Reps, 11. And the statistics are not much better when you get to the states. And it goes on and on and on. You know, in terms of corporate boards and direct, a recent report by the Professional Women's Roundtable lists 21% of board directorships of NSC, the Nigerian Stock Exchange listed companies, the top 20 companies listed by the stock exchange. We've got 21% board directorships. So, you know, the numbers vary depending on sector, but nowhere near 50%. Now, you asked me, what are the major impediments to female inclusion in the workplace? It's things like workplace culture. And we talked about leadership. So it starts with leadership. It's workplace culture. It's the lack of female leaders and role models and exemplars. Because when you see yourself, a lot of it is mindsets for women. You know, when you see yourself in those positions, so you see people who look like you, see people who've worked that journey and can show you that this is possible, it definitely helps in terms of shifting of the mindsets. So while a lot of it is cultural in terms of how we are socialized, even as women, and how big it is we can dream, a lot of it is also, you know, socialization obviously leads to mindsets. And so that can be broken when you have role models, when you have exemplars, when you have mentors, when you have people who are beyond mentoring are also sponsors, who speak up for you, who promote you, who push you forward, even when you do not realize yourself that you may be ready for those jobs. So again, you know, impediments include lack of flexible workplaces. And if there's one thing that this year, a COVID year, has shown us, is the fact that we can work flexibly, we can work remotely. We will not all sort of collapse if we are not physically in our offices and our physical places of work every day. It is possible with the right enablement, with the right resources to work effectively and work flexibly and still get the job done and really work from anywhere in the world and get the job done. And these are some of the issues that were traditionally, especially when it comes to, you know, women with families and, you know, the burden of care, that would sort of essentially lead to them eventually sort of falling out of the workforce. And so I've spoken about mentors and sponsorship. Now, resolutions for me is where leadership comes in. And I think we cannot overemphasize the power of leadership. Leadership has to be leadership in corporate organizations that truly have an interest in promoting diversity and inclusion. Needs to be intentional. They need to recognize and believe and show and demonstrate an interest strategically in the policies that they make in pushing forward gender diversity in a strategic way. It has to be leadership that cascades down and really shows the benefits of what it means when an organization, you know, has a wide pool of opinions and resources and talent. And that it's not, and let me emphasize that, it is never one versus the other. It's never a male versus female thing. It's the fact that our workplaces are more, you know, thrive and more productive and more efficient and elevate results when you have a wide range of opinion being carried forward. So I hope I've answered some of your questions.
Oh, Fabia, I must say you have done an amazing job in answering the questions. I'm quite surprised. I didn't even think you had that much more to add. Thank you so much. So I have quite a lot of comments and questions for the panel. And so in this case, because all three panelists have spoken, I will then throw the questions out. But a lot of the comments so far are coming on the heels of Fabia's presentation. And Adeleke says we can have a diverse and inclusive organization. The two must go hand in hand. And Peter agrees with Adeleke and goes to say many organizations try to be diverse, such as banks and large transnational corporations, but many are not inclusive, as not everyone has the same opportunity for advancement and growth, despite efforts they put in, you know, to succeed. But he says Whisker is a great example of the empowerment. Thank you for sharing this good news. Adeleke goes on to say, Adeleke goes on to say that implicit bias is a major problem, not only in corporate organizations, but also in our polity. And he has a question on the heels of that comment. And I would like any of the three panelists who wants to answer this to talk about it. He says, how do we handle political leaders who keep insulting our sensibilities through lopsided political appointments in the face of glaring ethnic, cultural, and religious diversities? So I'll go on. I mean, let me just go through all the questions, and anyone who wants to answer the particular comment can just indicate. Now, we have here, Peter then says, that is the question for a separate session and perhaps a conference, meaning that question requires a whole conference on its own. This is bigger than this particular place. Now, Larry Buhari says, great presentation. And Adeshola says, the more diverse you become, the greater talent pool you attract. Thank you, Fabia. Dr. Ekwoba says, Ogumekon, thank you for the great presentation. And Adeleke says, ensuring organizational diversity and inclusion must be consciously done. Olutomi Wusu says, great, congrats, great presentation. Uzo James says, thanks for the presentation, ma'am. There's perhaps an untested statement that women are more likely to get bigger jobs than men in the corporate world. Now, this is a question. What's behind this kind of thought process and how can it be tackled? Hilda and Fabia, you have that question to deal with. And I would like Engineer Charles to also talk about this and say if he agrees with this comment that has been said. Are women actually really more likely to get bigger jobs in the corporate world than men? And if this is true, how can it be tackled? Edison, now there's another question. I will still run over the questions, but I just want to make sure I go through before it all piles out. Omolola says, how do we change the impact of stereotypes on limiting the opportunities for career advancement for women, especially seeing that stereotypes span eons and are almost unconsciously transferred? So we have one person saying women are likely to get bigger jobs in the workplace than men, and yet another person saying, how do we actually change the stereotypes of women not getting to advance in their careers? And it's interesting to note from their names, I believe that one was from a man and one is from a woman. This is quite a good, this is a good, interesting comments from our panelists. Moralake says, very true, Mrs. Fabia. The workplace can be flexible. We can work from home and attain significant productivity. The pandemic has truly shown us that. Fantastic contributions, Fabia, from Omolola. So our panelists, are we ready to to answer some of the questions and to also talk to some of the comments that have come up? So are we ready? Are we good to go? So Fabia, I think you, seeing as your presentation has probably spoiled a lot of this comments, would you like to start, or do you want Hilda to take the floor?
That's fine, but I needed you to sort of go over a couple of the questions.
Okay, great. Okay, so now let me start with Omolola. Omolola says, how do we change the impact of stereotypes on limiting the opportunities for career advancement for women? She believes that these stereotypes have spanned eons and are almost unconsciously transferred. Without even thinking about it, they're just transferred in both the minds of the men and even the women. So how do you change that impact of stereotypes on limiting the opportunities for career advancement for women? What can we do about it?
So I think, I think it's having the increased conversations and just sort of creating the awareness. Really, the more conversations we have about the benefits of diversity, the benefits of having a more inclusive environment, just creating the awareness of what it is, different perspectives bring to the table, and, making the business case for it. I think if those conversations carry on, so platforms like this and just, continuing to have those conversations, I think those sort of stereotypes will begin to gradually, dissipate, so to speak. I think leadership in organizations have a great role to play. Leaders need to be champions of gender issues. They need to be, sorry, I need to keep my video off just because my internet is a bit unstable, so bear with me.
Thank you. No, it's fine, Fabia.
Leaders need to be champions of gender issues. We need to be able to communicate and cascade down the benefits. We need to even begin to incorporate things like more gender sensitive language and be conscious of our language and our actions. There's been a lot, especially more in the well, a lot now, especially again with the pandemic, has really been a sort of panacea of bringing out all sorts of things in terms of gender-based violence, sexual harassment, and those kinds of things, which are things that are talked about in the Western world and sort of policies and strategic actions are taken. But I think that the more we create awareness really around these issues, the more we leadership sees their role as promoting a balanced and equitable environment for all and pushing and promoting that agenda.
Okay, Fabio is still on. Yes, thank you.
Hello?
Hello, yes, Fabio. We lost you for a second, but you're back.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So essentially, I'm saying awareness creation and continuing the conversations. I'm building up the conversations. I'm promoting the reasons why gender diversity essentially, and not just gender diversity, but diversity is important, and the benefits which we've talked about.
Thank you so much, Fabia. That was an awesome answer to that question. Hilda, do you have any comments to give us on this topic? Because it's an issue that we're dealing all when we go. Hilda, is Hilda there? Yes, thank you, Hilda.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I think the one thing the one thing I'd add to Fabia's answer is the other side of the coin, right? One of the things that perpetuates stereotypes as well is self-limiting beliefs, and this is especially true for women. I think we find that when we are put into a certain box, we begin to believe that and behave in that way, as opposed to actually asking ourselves, hey, let me do it and see what the worst can happen is. Dealing with your own self-limiting beliefs can help you combat stereotypes, or at least say, I do not have to go I don't have to go in the same direction as everybody says. I've got somebody who says that the best advice they received was summon the confidence of a white male when you get into meetings, right? Like, forget everything you think about the expectations of a woman or the way women behave. Think about yourself as a white male. How would you behave differently? And I think that's the other side of the equation. So a lot of work has to be done, as Fabia said, from leadership perspective, from breaking stereotypes perspective. But even as women, and I think as when you find yourself as a minority in an environment of diversity, try to think about your self-limiting beliefs and how you overcome that, just to take advantage of life beyond the stereotype.
Thank you, Hilda. Engineer Charles, I would like to hear from a man. We women have really dealt with this topic, and I would like to hear, how do you think we can break the stereotypes? But I would also like you to talk to the question that came up from a man that said women seem to be getting the bigger jobs, they get the bigger jobs as opposed to men. Do you think this is true, and what do you have to say? Engineer Charles, are you still with us?
I am with you indeed.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
The 2 points, I think they sort of go to side by side. They go together, really. Bigger job for women and stereotypes. Let me explain what I mean. We all have our biases, and there are stereotypes that are built over time. So those biases are part of our culture and all the rest of it. But I think to overcome that is this what we are doing right now, creating awareness on the benefits. So there's always what I call informed enlightened self-interest. So I want to grow my business, and I see the opportunity inherent in what Fabio has presented clearly, the benefits, which we've all been talking about really throughout the whole conference. Now, that will motivate leaders to do the right thing. In my earlier contribution, I said, leadership is education in virtue. What do I really mean? If I'm consistent in implementing or following the process of recruitment, minimizing my desire out of emotion or passion, for whatever influence it is, to exercise discretion, the chances are the best candidate will come up, be they male or female. I'm talking about just gender. Therefore, the best woman could get the bigger job because it's competitive, it's transparent, it's a standardized process. So I believe with standardization, more women will of necessity get the top job, and the biases that exist in organization will be overcome. I can tell you, many years ago when I started my career here in Houston, where I am today, going offshore, it was not usual to see a woman. And so when we saw the first woman, it was like seeing something strange. But today, they are all over the place. They are doing their job, and a lot of them are doing way better than the men. And I think that is what we are going to see, the kind of story Kim told us in his late paper. We're going to overcome them. And so I see a lot of opportunity for women to grow from the statistics we've seen. If the target is 50%, yes, we'll get there. There may be some consequences, but it will vary from person to person. And I don't think leadership in the organization can necessarily predefine those conditions because women have the ability to multitask and manage their varied responsibility and do them well, be them as mothers and executives. So a lot of them have shown they can handle all this very well, and they are making success of it. So, did I answer your question? I think yes.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Thank you, sir. Okay. You did a great job. Thank you so much. Now, you know, we are going to gradually start coming to the end of this very interesting program. And from everything that's going on, from what we're discussing, from the questions and the comments, we are seeing that there's a need to have more of those conversations coming up, and we're definitely going to make sure we have that. But I have a few comments here that I'm going to read out, and also one or two questions. Moralake says that quote, "Trees die from the top," is very relevant for this time, given the staggering statistics about the gender parity in senior management roles you gave. We need more diversity in senior management roles, particularly women. Events in Nigeria has shown that we need more women. And that led to a comment and a question which I also had. If we have 5% of CEOs as women, does that mean that, and so I'm asking all the panelists, does that mean that we're going to need to educate the men to begin to include more women? Or are we going to have to educate the women to become more involved and to be able to drop all the impediments? Because I did realize that nobody really has spoken about what the actual impediments are. That's the elephant in the room, and the real solutions to those impediments. So that's it. We'll have that as we round up this whole session. Then Anjita says, "Good evening." She has a question. Is hiring, and it said it's slightly not from any of the presentations. Is hiring an experienced candidate from another company helpful, or a fresher whom the company, now this is to Hilda, I presume, but any of the other panelists could answer it. Or is hiring an experienced candidate from another company helpful, or a fresher whom the company can mold according to their organizational structure and culture? So Hilda, I hope you noted that question. You'll answer that in your closing remarks to us. We have just a few more minutes. And Latifa says, "Thank you for putting this webinar together." And so those are the questions that we have right now. So to all the panelists, what do we think is contributing? We've all said leadership, and trees die from the top, but we have very few men at the top. What is responsible in terms of, is it that the men need to be educated to bring in more women, or do the women actually need to be educated and empowered, or do they need to have that will, like Hilda said, to break the self-limiting thoughts? So my panelists, and Hilda, you have a question which I believe you have noted. Thank you very much. Panelists?
Would you like to go?
Okay. Yes. So Fabian, you can go for 2 minutes. Hilda then comes up, and then I'm going to also throw a question to Professor Virile Nation, and as we have one very special question for him at the end of the show. Thank you, Fabia. Well, listen.
Okay, thank you, Anison. So, well, thank you. I hope you can hear me. I think it's a mixed bag, really, to be honest. I think it's both. It's awareness creation in terms of, I mean, it's 5%, so which means you have 90 to 95% of those who control, sit on top of companies and control hiring and recruitment as men. So, awareness needs to be created, and we need to have he for she's. We need to have more men on board for the cause of ensuring that, their organizations are more balanced, their organizations mirror society, and that their leadership needs to be intentional, having understood the benefits of why diversity and inclusion in workplaces is so important. And I speak not just now, since we're wrapping up, not just specifically to gender, but also across culture, ethnicity, ability, and disability. So organizations really need to mirror society. And if we've made the business case for why it's important to have a wider spread, then I think that whoever is sitting at the top of organizations, this should be a priority agenda. In terms of women, yes, women do need also to be empowered. Their capacity needs to be used. We did talk a little bit, yes, about the challenges that they face. It's cultural, it's socialization, it's mindsets, like Hilda and I referred to. That belief in role modeling, in seeing people who look like you, who sit at the top of this organization. So beyond the 5%, the opportunity to build a critical mass, or, to just have that opportunity to be mentored, so that this is possible, and that helps in shifting the mindset. And that's what organizations like Whisker do, which is to help to bridge that gap by building the capacity and building, the self-confidence and the mindset, and not just that, but the skills, the soft skills that are required. So women, for example, the reason why we tend to be more shy, we tend to not be strong negotiators, we tend to not be sort of vocal in meetings and things like that. So those are kind of the skills that we need to build, just be able to build that confidence of women to really apply and believe in themselves to go for the top jobs. Because sometimes it's also that capacity to want to believe that you can do it, and being ready. Opportunity meets preparedness. And so that when there is a call, it is merit-based, because at the end of the day, it's still merit-based. So however however the policies, and I do believe in affirmative action. I think that, we need to have, that's the only way that you can move forward, is if you have deliberate strategies to actually increase the numbers. But then that's not to say that you then reduce the standards because you need to have a woman in a position, therefore you would take any woman, and that's then the job in terms of building capacity, so that when those opportunities come, women are ready for it. So yeah, I think just strategies to attract and retain talent, and just continue to push the importance of society, of organizations mirroring society. I hope that's
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Fabia. You've done an excellent job. You've had a very excellent job. So Hilda, yes, over to you, Hilda. So you have one question, and yes, your comments as we round up.
So I'll start with the question, right? I think for me, it depends on what your goals are and what your constraints are, because there's no straightforward answer to, do I hire a fresh graduate versus an experienced hire, what's the role? Is it an entry-level role, or is it a role that's managing people? A fresh graduate will not be able to manage people. What are the company needs? Do you need somebody who ramps up quickly, or do you have time to train the person? That's also going to determine, can you pay an experienced hire? Will you get the right kind of career progression? Do you have the resources to train a new hire? I think it's not something you can answer just from a single sentence question. There's a reason why most companies have both graduate recruitment programs and experienced hiring programs. It's because you can't replace one with the other. There's room for both in an organization, and depending on your context and your constraints, one might be better than the other. So you have to think about your particular, why exactly you're trying to hire this person. On the second issue, so wrapping up, I think for me, even though earlier I talked about the self-limiting beliefs, I think more work needs to be done. I don't want to say on the male side, but also on the structural side, right? Women face a lot of pressures that men don't, and our workplaces don't reflect that. They don't adjust for that. A lot of women end up, for example, dropping out of the workforce, not by choice, but out of necessity. And I was almost one of those women, actually. You think about when you have a child and you've got 3 months maternity leave. So you're forced to make a choice. Do I go back and leave my infant breastfeeding baby who can't even roll over at home, not knowing what time I'll come home because of traffic every day? Or do I give up this thing because clearly my family is more important to me? We force women to make such choices all the time. And I think for me, one of the most exciting things that I would love to see coming out of the coronavirus pandemic is how this changes, right? We now know that people can work effectively from home. So must you really force somebody with a 3-month-old baby to leave them at home? Or we're going to move to a place where young mothers can actually spend a year working remotely or just with flexi hours? How would that change if it was an option, for example? And even from a cultural side, right? If you are dealing with a male patriarchal society, which we are, you might want to stay in the workplace, but everybody in your family thinks you should stay at home with a child, Now that you can do both while at home, how's that going to change? I think the more flexibility you bring to the table, and the more we understand that the pressures men face and those that women face are different, but can both be accommodated, the quicker we'll take strides in the right direction.
Thank you, Hilda. So, Engineer Charles, we would like to have your comments on as we wrap up this panel session today.
Well,
Charles, yes, please.
Yes, I think it's all been covered. The point, though, is that nobody gives power. There are already laws and policies for inclusiveness. I think the women need to be encouraged and motivated. But it's very doubtful that the leader or whoever is the leader today will go looking for women unless they push for it. That would be my reaction. Yes, at the board level, there's a conscious effort. I'm not sure you're going to have them at the executive level unless there's a push for it. Today, there's none. So yes, there's a need for women to push more. Maybe, as has been said, there's a need for some structural or deliberate effort to encourage the leadership to look for women. But for all that to work, I think Hilda has said it, we have to create an environment that is conducive for women to thrive. Because today our corporate environment is structured for the man who has very little concern while he's at work about other things outside the workplace. But mothers and women in the workplace are preoccupied with other domestic issues, or if you like, family issues, the child, because that's the way we are constructed. And I think we need to consciously build that in and make a create family-friendly environment to enable women to thrive. So just to correct myself, there's a lot that can be done by the leadership. There's a lot of policies and legislation in place, but the women also need to push, particularly women in corporate, to ensure that some of those policies are given effect within their organization. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Engineer Charles. And with Professor Bello Osagie, we're thankful that you have been with us on this journey and that you're still here. And I would like you to actually throw your own final thoughts on this issue, especially with regards to how we can actually push for greater gender diversity and diversity in general across board, from gender to every area of diversity. And as you have shown by the clear example of your leadership when you were the chairman of UBA, United Bank for Africa. Thank you, Professor Bello Osagie.
Look, thank you very much indeed, again, for the invitation. I don't think I can do any better than by echoing the very comprehensive and I thought the very excellent comments made by Hilda, in particular as she talked about the specific and the peculiar issues that women face. It is very, very correct to say that a lot of jobs and the work environment was really designed for men who had wives who were all housewives. And it's also true to say that we really need to question a lot of assumptions we make, not just the fact of needing to work remotely, but also the fact that sometimes I do think that bosses keep people in work for much longer hours than they absolutely need to be there. And therefore, after a while, a certain culture develops that you feel that even if you can finish your work at 4 o'clock or at 5 o'clock, you feel you need to hang around till 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock just to give a great impression that yes, you are a very loyal and hardworking person, and productivity becomes less of the concern than just eye service, so to speak. So if I'm to sum up, I think we need one, a commitment to diversity along all the lines, and I focus very much on what I think is regional and ethnic diversity, but gender and generational diversity are also very important. We need a commitment. I think that we need to ensure that in all organizations that people have role models and icons who are there, because I think that when you go into an organization and there's one woman already there, or there is one Muslim already there, or there's one person from your part of the country already there, it sort of encourages you and makes you feel that you can make that place a home, or you feel that there's something for you. And so I think it's important that we do have the first. And I think those people who are the first to get to a place have in many ways a special responsibility to conduct themselves in such a way that people are encouraged to hire more and more people like them, and also to help the various human resources organizations, departments in the companies look for people who are like them. I do think that we have made a lot of progress, and what's fascinating for me now is that wherever I go in the world, what's very interesting to me now is that in many universities in particular, but it's happening in some organizations, we're almost at the stage now where we have to build, or we have to consider having coaches for men, because on a strict merit situation, for entry into universities and to many companies, if we went strictly by merit, we probably have 60 to 65% women and 35% men. And that is a measure of how much talent that we lost from women in the past, and the way in which the situation is going. So to all the women, and there are many on this panel and in the audience, you've done an amazing job. Please continue to do it. And when us men are such enfeebled characters, can you please agree to a small quota for us so that there's some of us who are left in the place? Thank you very much, and I've had a wonderful time.
Thank you so much, Professor Virile Osage, and very interesting observations. It's been an interesting conversation. We would like to say a big thank you to our keynote speaker and all our panelists. Thanks everyone in the audience. There has been a great knowledge exchange amongst us all. And please email rbadinriwa at that's in the chat comments as well, at lbs.edu.ng to connect with the Nigeria chapter of the Nigeria chapter of the Humanistic Management Network. We'd like to say thank you to you, everyone. Thank you for all your comments and everything. We will definitely make sure that we continue the conversation as we go on. It's been an awesome pleasure, and I have been very, very, very honored to moderate this session, this conference today. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was an amazing and very insightful panel, I think. And I'm just learning so much. I will need weeks to digest everything from this conference. But I would like to invite you to just stay a few minutes longer, because we're now having another really impressive African female leader, who is Iram from Kenya, and she's leading the project. She's the project manager for Enable Me, which is a platform being developed for everything disability, done by My Handicap Foundation in partnership for Light for the World. So Iram, are you there?
Hi, Ernst. Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Iram. Great having you here. Let me make you co-host, and then I would suggest you just get going. So the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, Anitan, for the presentation you have done at Fabia. It's great that Fabia initiated the inclusion topic, because as much as she was focusing on gender, I will be focusing on the biggest minority, which is disability. It's important that I start with the fact that disability is the highest, it is among the minorities, and they're among the highest numbers of populated across the world, but highly underrepresented globally. So as much as we are fighting Black Matters, like Black Lives Matter, we are fighting for the minorities in Australia, we're fighting for the country minorities. We need to remember that globally, the minorities are the persons with disability, and they are underrepresented across the world. So there's no third world, there's no first world, there's no developed, there's no underdeveloped. They are underrepresented across. And so Light for the World is an organization that has been focusing on persons with disability for many years. And the focus has been on eye health, independent living, inclusive education, and disability rights. Within disability rights, there's a lot in terms of inclusive and empowerment, livelihood and empowerment. There is also rehabilitation and education. So I work with Enable Me, which is a platform that we are developing. Kenya is initially the pioneer, and then we roll out across Nepal, South Africa, Uganda, Germany, Switzerland, and hopefully spread globally. And what is Enable Me? Enable Me is a platform that is going to be online that will help assist build communities for persons with disabilities and their stakeholders. Communities being their families, their carers, people who provide services to persons with disability. And so inclusion in total. because no one is to be left behind. And what does that mean? Let me share a presentation that I have. Prepared, share screen. No, sorry. Okay. Where's my slideshow? Great. I don't know if you see it.
Yes, we
Can
do.
you see it?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So basically what is Enable Me? It's information sharing, where community-based technology solution that connects, supports, and empowers people with disabilities globally through sharing critical information and value add-on services. The value add-on services are things like a job portal specific to persons with disabilities, therefore creating livelihood and opportunities. A marketplace, so if there are persons with disability who are looking into getting assistive devices, that's where they would be able to connect. And also in terms of communities where if I have a person with disability who I'm not too sure how to look after, or I'm looking for something to be able to support that person with disability, I'm able to connect to the community and then I'll get advice from the peers. So basically that's what we are, and enabling 1 billion people with disabilities worldwide by providing relevant information. The need for the platform is basically because there's a growing need. There is no particular space where you can go and get all of this information available. There's always contradictory information, and there's lack of knowledge. I wouldn't want to say ignorance, but lack of knowledge when it comes to persons with disabilities. There's poor public distribution. Many organizations lack the competence of sharing information, and there's undiscovered potential. I always say, and I like the way Fabian said that we always talk about diversity, but we always forget inclusion. And the potential the persons with disability have, especially within the workspace environment, is so immense. The loyalty and productivity is usually so high that we overlook that. And the organizations that have already engaged persons with disability within the workspace can definitely tell you that the ROIs have been impacted to a high percentage because the productivity is extremely high. So there's the undiscovered potential and basically information sharing. The core features will be the information portal, the online community, and projects and services, which will include the job portal, assistive device finder, training and coaching online, and embedded online services. And the expected outcomes is people will make self-informed choices, because what will happen is persons with disability will no longer need to rely on others to provide information. They become independent with the online portal. We'll have informed carers, which are parents and friends who are able to access services and products and get support and understand what challenges they're facing. And then there's a network of peers, basically getting moral support and increased self-esteem, because another challenge we face with persons with disability is they have low self-esteem. This is due to the stigma that is around them. You find that, for example, in Africa, there is a mentality that if you're a person with disability, you are either cursed or you are outcasted for one reason or another, and therefore it to a certain extent, it just deteriorates your self-esteem to a level where you feel there is no value that you can give to society. And so it's very important that we help promote spaces where they can increase their self-esteem and also help build their confidence as individuals. Because you find that sometimes they have a lot of potential, but they lack self-esteem, and therefore the productivity is pretty much limited. And then increased awareness for the community of their community by accessing of jobs, increased access to government services, and ability to contribute to the society. For me, this is really important because they are always forgotten. Persons with disability are forever forgotten. It's a question I always ask out there is, when growing up, how many people with disabilities did you see or did you meet who were working within the corporate space, within the private sector, within the public services, right? The awareness is now coming up, but then still not at the pace we would like. So it's a conversation that needs to be held. It's reminders that we need to have, and we need to be very deliberate to include them in our workspaces, to include them in our events, to include them in the social surroundings that we have. The partnership model that Enable Me has is that it's user-driven, that by providing information, services, and community. And we have content partners and community partners and the lead organization. So one of the lead organizations is Light for the World, which is a global view. And then in local, we have lead organizations within the respective countries. And then we have service partners who will be managing it. For example, for the job portal, we'll have proper recruiters. For the online marketplace, then we will have professional market organizations running this. And that will drive the data analysis. Lead partners will expect added values such as knowledge, increased knowledge base, online community for interaction, online services to complement the offline programs, and also new business models. They will also enjoy the state-of-art technology and coaching from Enable Me and membership of the community. And their responsibilities will basically be to provide curated information and mobilize the online community in the respective countries, as well as in-country activities. So basically, the business model is, we have transformed it. It was formed by donors and philanthropists. That's the reason why Light for the World is a partner, and therefore offered grants and subsidies to to Enable Me. But eventually, within the next 1 to 2 years, we are hoping to generate it into a business model where it will generate income for itself and run independently. And therefore, it's the best thing that could ever happen within the disability world, because we are bringing communities together. And this is not local, but global communities. What has happened is most of the people, you find that persons with disability in Kenya are already in groups. And it becomes a challenge when you're talking to them about the disability world in Uganda or the disability world in Europe. They're totally disconnected. They have no understanding of what is going around there, what is new, what is not happening, what is working, what is not working. And so building this community, this global community, will bring them together. And we are hoping that you'll be able to drive the conversations out there and create awareness. So basically that has been our focus. And it's a hard job, but again, I say it's important for us to have it, because it is the driving force to a better world. It is a driving force to what next when it comes to inclusion, and also embedding them on our workspaces. There's so much value in including them within our workspaces, because we find that the ROIs are increased, they have loyalty, so we have reduced attrition. We have workspaces that are accessible, and accessibility is not only for the persons with disability, but for everybody. We need to remember that 7 out of 10 people across the world will face disability at one point in their life. That means out of 10 of us in this call, 7 of us will experience disability at one point. And so we need to start creating spaces for ourselves, not for persons with disability, but for ourselves. It's very important. And that means if we don't break a leg, or we do not experience visual impairment, we'll age. And what comes with aging? We are not able to walk, we need wheelchairs, we have reduced hearing impairment, reduced hearing, or even poor eyesight. So we need to start preparing these things for ourselves, because then eventually we will need these places. And just those few for me is, I think, the most that I could say for the few minutes I have. And I'm open for any questions, Ernest. Anybody? Questions, comments?
Thank you so much, Iram. I'm scanning the chat, and if anyone has any questions, you can also unmute yourself. and raise a question.